Groundwater and surface water are connected by the water cycle, also known as the hydrologic cycle. Rain falls on the land. This is known as precipitation. Parts of the rainwater run across the land and into the rivers and streams, surface runoff. Some of the rainwater enters the ground through infiltration. Water can only enter the ground through permeable soils and rocks. The pores are all connected, allowing water to pass through them. Porosity depends on the number and size of pores in soil and rock. Water will continue to soak into the ground until it reaches a layer of impermeable rock. Once water reaches the impermeable layer, it keeps the pore spaces in the layers above it filled. Water that moves freely in a layer of impermeable rock is called aquifer. In this way, the water which seeps into the ground passes through a zone of aeration, or unsaturated zone. Some pores are filled with water and some are filled with air, and into the zone of saturation, the ground is completely saturated with water. The water in this zone is called groundwater. The dividing line between these two zones is called the water table. Springs are where water seeps directly out of the ground, where an aquifer reaches the ground surface. Thermal springs are ordinary springs, except that the water is warm and, in some places, hot. When two layers of impervious rock lie between and act as a reservoir, artesian basins are formed. The water in this layer, which is under pressure, gushes out spontaneously and forms an artesian well. A river is part of the surface waters and is a constant water flow that goes along in a natural riverbed. Water quantity is the volume of water that passes through the cross-section of a river in 1 second, and the amount of water that passes through the cross-section for a certain period of time is called river runoff. The beginning of a river is the place from which it is clearly defined as the surface flow. An estuary is the place where a river flows into another river, lake or sea, ocean, basin. They are of two types, delta and estuary. Delta is the mouth of numerous sleeves, which are arranged fan-shaped, where the rate of deposition of sediment exceeds the rate of removal of sediment. The estuary is a mouth that is closely associated with the presence of high tides. During high tides, seawater penetrates into the estuary and mixes with river water. At low tide, a powerful flow is formed, which exports a large amount of accumulated alluvial material to the sea basin. The length of the river is determined by the distance between the source and the mouth. The river system consists of a main river and tributaries. The main river is the river that flows into the ocean, sea, lake. A tributary is a river that flows into another river. The area from which a river or river system collects its waters is called a catchment area. The conditional line that separates the two catchments is called the watershed. The catchment areas are divided into drainage and non-drainage. The basins of rivers that do not flow into the seas are called drains, and conversely those that flow into the oceans and seas are called drains. The sources of nourishment are rainwater, snow water, and the conversion of solid precipitation and glaciers into surface runoff as a result of melting. For the plains and hilly areas with temperate continental climate, the rain-snow feeding is typical, and in the high mountain watersheds, the rivers have snow-rain feeding. As for the alpine belts and the polar regions, snow-glacial and glacial snow feeding is typical. River regime is the annual variation in the flow of a river. Their main characteristics are the state of high water, maximum runoff, and low water, minimum runoff. It is represented by a graphic image called a hydrogram. In areas with an equatorial climate, the rivers are entirely rain-fed and flooded all year round. In the subequatorial climate, the runoff regime is clearly flooded during the wet period, summer, which lasts 6 to 9 months and is of rainy origin. In the subtropics with a Mediterranean climate, the runoff regime is flooded in winter due to precipitation and low water in summer. The fluctuations of the monthly water volumes are large. In areas with a temperate continental climate, high water is in the spring months and is a consequence of snowmelt and precipitation. The low water phase is during the summer and autumn months and is often interrupted by single rainfall. In watersheds with temperate oceanic climates, the state of high water content is during the winter months. In the glaciers of Antarctica and Greenland, the rivers are fed entirely by glacial waters during the short summer.